Hilda Vance entered the walled garden knowing the caretakers had been dismissed 3 days prior. She did not announce herself. She did not second-guess. She wedged the pruning shears into her coat pocket, noted the housekeeper's abandoned cottage with its shuttered windows, and climbed over the stone wall. The snap of frozen branches echoed across the courtyard. A figure emerged from the overgrowth, wild-eyed, stumbling, a walking stick carving violent arcs through the air. Hilda kept moving forward. By the time she reached the center path, her breathing had steadied. The Duke was destroying his own rose hedge. She watched him swing blindly, thorns catching fabric, his curses raw and guttural. "Those roses survived the frost," she called out. "Pity they won't survive you." The thrashing stopped. Then, from somewhere in the tangle of bare branches, a voice. "Hush! Show yourself." Hilda didn't flinch. Her vision adjusted to the grey winter light. She could see him clearly now, the Duke of Northumbria, standing like something dragged from a shipwreck, his posture defensive, his face turned toward the sound of her voice but not finding it. A jagged mark cut across his temple where the war had taken his sight. "You're standing in the herb bed," she said. "This is private property. The lavender you're crushing would disagree. It's been here longer than your title." His head tilted sharply toward her. "That gives you no right. You haven't been outside in weeks." Her tone was matter-of-fact. She knelt and began unwrapping burlap from the exotic cutting she'd come to protect. "The staff said you'd rather freeze than accept help." The Duke took a step forward, his stick extended like a weapon. "The staff had no authority to speak of me. They had no reason to lie about watching you starve." His knuckles whitened on the cane. "Leave. Now." Hilda's gaze caught on something behind him, a stack of official correspondence wedged beneath a garden bench, the wax seal visible even from this distance. Her pulse quickened, but she kept her hands steady on the plant. "Your uncle arrived in the village yesterday," she said quietly. "Lord Garrick. He's been asking questions about the estate's management." The Duke went absolutely rigid. Hilda stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "You're not hiding because you're blind, Your Grace. You're hiding because you think being blind makes you powerless. You understand nothing. I understand you've locked yourself in this garden for months while men with half your intelligence plot to declare you unfit." She moved toward the greenhouse door. "I understand you're letting them win without a fight. Stop walking." She gripped the rusted handle and pulled. The hinges shrieked. Cold air rushed into the abandoned space, disturbing 2 years of settled dust. "If you want to surrender your estate," Hilda said, her breath visible in the freezing air, "that's your choice. But don't pretend it's nobility. It's cowardice dressed up as grief." For 3 heartbeats, the Duke said nothing. Then he laughed, a sound like something breaking. "You're either reckless or destitute." "Destitute," Hilda admitted. She turned to face him directly now, this man whose features she could finally study. Capable hands, weathered face. But his eyes, pale, unfocused, held something she recognized immediately. Fury. And beneath it, terror. "Which means I have nothing to lose by telling you the truth." The Duke lunged. Hilda sidestepped, watching him collide with the stone fountain. He caught himself, barely, fingers scraping moss. "You're trespassing," he rasped. "You're bleeding." She nodded toward his hand. "3rd time you've hit that fountain this week, judging by the blood on the rim." His head snapped toward her voice. "You've been watching me. I've been saving plants while you wage war on your own property." She knelt again, her hands working quickly to secure burlap around the frost-damaged stems. "The persimmon tree died yesterday. You ripped it out by the roots. I don't need a gardener. You need something." She stood, wiping her hands on her apron. "Food, perhaps. The kitchen's been cold for days." He moved toward her again, this time more carefully, his stick tapping a perimeter. "I don't need your pity." "Good. I'm not offering any." That stopped him. His jaw worked, searching for the next attack. Hilda picked up her basket. "The ground near the east wall is frozen mud. You'll slip if you keep charging around like a wounded bull. I know my own estate." His foot caught. He went down hard, his cane clattering away into the dark. Hilda didn't move to help. She waited, counting seconds, watching him struggle in the freezing slurry. "Well?" he snarled from the ground. "Well, what? Are you going to stand there?" "Yes." She adjusted her shawl. "You know your estate, Your Grace. I'm sure you can find your way up." She walked away, boots crunching on gravel. Behind her, she heard him swear, low, vicious, humiliated. At the garden gate, she paused. "The kitchen door doesn't lock anymore. I'll be using it." She didn't wait for his response. For 2 days, Robert heard her moving through his house. He stayed in his study, eating nothing. On the 3rd morning, the smell reached him. Bread. Fresh bread, yeast and heat and something herbaceous he couldn't name. His stomach contracted violently. He gripped the desk. He would not go to her. He would not. The door opened. "I'm leaving a plate," Hilda said. No greeting. No apology for entering uninvited. "Eat it or don't." The door closed. Robert sat rigid, furious, starving. The scent was overwhelming. His hand found the plate. Still warm. He touched the bread's crust. Rosemary, he realized. She'd used rosemary from his garden. He ate standing up, hating every bite, hating her more. The next day, she was in the library. He heard pages turning. She was reading his books. "You're still here." His voice came out hoarse. "I'm cold," she said simply. "Your library has a fireplace. The cottage doesn't. You have no right. You have no staff, no food, and no plan." The pages stopped turning. "I can cook. I can read. I can keep the fires going through winter." "In exchange for what?" he asked. "You stop destroying the garden." Her tone was non-negotiable. "Whatever you're trying to prove by ripping out 100-year-old root systems, it's wasteful." He wanted to refuse. "Fine," he heard himself say. "Good." She stood. He heard her cross to the shelves. "I'll start with the agricultural texts. Your tenants haven't had proper guidance in years. Someone should know what's in your own library." "You presume." "I presume you'd rather I be useful than decorative, Your Grace." But he impulsively responded to her in a harsh and hurtful tone as he was yet to adjust to their newfound friendship. She left him standing there, off balance, outmaneuvered. The next day, Robert woke to silence. No footsteps. No fire crackling. No voice reading aloud from the tenant ledgers. She'd left. The realization struck him like a fist. Of course she'd left. He'd been, what had she called it? Wasteful. Impossible. He'd barely spoken to her in 5 days except to criticize her interpretation of crop rotation theory. He stood, dressed himself, fingers finding buttons through practiced memory. He didn't need her. He didn't need anyone. He would prove it. The garden path felt different. Ice beneath yesterday's snow. His stick found purchase, then didn't. He adjusted, stepping carefully where he remembered the slope beginning. His boot met empty air. The fall was sudden, graceless. He hit the ravine slope and tumbled, thorns tearing his coat, his hands, his face. He slammed into frozen ground and couldn't breathe. Panic arrived like a living thing. Which way was up? Where were the walls? He reached out and found nothing, just air and his own gasping. "Stop moving." Her voice cut through the roaring in his skull. "Where?" He couldn't finish. "You fell into the drainage ravine. 6 feet down. There's ice below you." His fingers dug into half-frozen earth. "I can't." "You can." Her voice was closer now, directly above. "Listen to me. Not the wind. Not your fear. Me. I don't know where. 3 feet to your right, there's an exposed root. Thick as your wrist. Find it." He moved his hand, shaking, patting blindly at mud and stone. "Slower," she commanded. "Feel. Don't grab." His fingers brushed something solid, curved. He gripped it. "Good. Now pull yourself toward my voice. Don't think about the drop. Think about my voice." He pulled. Thorns bit into his forearms. His shoulder screamed. But he moved. "Again," Hilda said. He climbed toward her, inch by inch, guided only by her steady instructions, until her hands, calloused, strong, gripped his wrists and hauled him over the edge. They collapsed together on solid ground, both breathing hard. "You're an idiot," she said. "Yes," he agreed. Neither of them let go. "Gravel," Hilda said. Robert's boot scraped the path. "Sounds the same as yesterday." "Listen harder." He stood still, then shifted his weight. The stones beneath his left foot gave differently than his right, smaller, more compact. "This section is newer. The eastern path was relaid 10 years ago. Different quarry." She moved ahead of him. "The old gravel has a sharper pitch. Feel it again." He did. She was right. The difference was barely perceptible, but it existed. 3 weeks of this. 3 weeks of her dragging him through his own ground, cataloguing every texture, every gradient, every smell. "Mint at the north gate," she'd told him the first day. "Thyme near the chapel ruins. Lavender dies back in winter, but you'll find woody stems if you need the boundary." He'd thought it absurd. Now he could stand in the garden and know exactly where he was by the wind direction and what it carried. Today, she brought him to the library at sunset. "Describe it," he said, standing by the window he couldn't see. She was quiet for a moment. "The sky's gone amber. Deep, like honey held to candlelight. The trees are like graphite sketches against it." His hand reached out, finding only air until her fingers, ink-stained, he knew, always ink-stained, brushed his. Neither moved. "The light's fading fast now," she whispered. "In 2 minutes, it'll be purple. Then gray. Then gone. Tell me when it changes." She didn't let go of his hand. "Now," she said softly. "Purple." They stood there as the world went dark, her palm warm against his, neither acknowledging what was happening and both knowing exactly what it was. "Gray," she finally said. "Stay," he said. She did. The tenant farmer arrived at noon, hat in hand, confused about why the Duke had summoned him. Robert sat behind his desk with military precision, head angled as though reading documents he couldn't see. "Mr. Whitmore," he said smoothly. "Thank you for coming." Hilda watched from the doorway, unease coiling in her chest. "Your Grace." Whitmore shifted nervously. "I received your note about the drainage concerns." "Yes." Robert's hand moved across the desk, searching. His fingers found the wine decanter. "Let's discuss it over a drink." Robert lifted the decanter, pouring confidently toward where he believed the glass to be. Wine splashed across the desk, across the papers, across Whitmore's sleeve. The room froze. "Your Grace, it's no trouble," Whitmore began. "Get out." Robert's voice was ice. "I'll just get out." Whitmore fled. The door barely closed before Robert swept his arm across the desk. The decanter shattered against the wall. "Feel better?" Hilda asked coldly. "Don't start. You humiliated that man because you were too proud to admit." "I don't need lessons from a squatter." The silence was absolute. "You want to play act at being cited?" Hilda's voice shook with fury. "Fine. Do it alone. But don't you dare punish decent people for the crime of witnessing your performance." She headed for the door. "Wait. Be the blind Duke," she said without turning, "or be nothing. I won't watch you destroy yourself pretending to be something you're not." She left him there, breathing hard, his cheeks stinging, the truth of her words cutting deep. That night, he found her in the kitchen. "Teach me," he said quietly. "Teach me to be blind." She looked at him for a long moment. "Tomorrow," she said. "We start tomorrow." But that night, Robert's uncle, Lord Garrick, arrived with 2 carriages and a magistrate's secretary. Hilda was hanging laundry when she heard the horses. She dropped the sheet and ran to call Robert, but not fast enough. "Well," Garrick said, stepping down from the carriage. "The estate isn't as abandoned as reported." He was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of smile that never involved the eyes. She caught herself. With the kind of smile that made her want to count her fingers after shaking his hand. "I'm the housekeeper," Hilda lied. "Strange. The housekeeper was dismissed 3 months ago." He circled her slowly. "Mrs. Albright, 63 years old. Scottish accent." Hilda said nothing. Garrick pulled a folded paper from his coat. "This is a merchant's complaint. Filed 6 weeks ago. Someone's been stealing from the village, herbs, roots, seeds from the apothecary garden. Her blood went cold. The descriptions match you precisely. He stepped closer. Theft is a hanging offense, Miss Vance. Miss Vance. He said it like a curse. Here's what will happen. The Council of the North convenes in 4 days to assess my nephew's competency. You will testify that he's unstable, violent, and unfit to manage his affairs. He's none of those things. Then you'll hang. Garrick tucked the paper away. Your choice, perjury or the gallows. Either way, I win. He'll never allow, she said. He'll never know. Garrick's voice dropped to a whisper. Because if you tell him, I'll have you arrested tonight. The only reason you're still free is because you're useful to me. Stop being useful, and I stop being merciful. He climbed back into his carriage, leaving her standing in the courtyard, trapped between 2 impossible choices. Inside, she could hear Robert calling her name. She answered, walked into his, and he told her tomorrow would be his competency hearing. The chamber was built for intimidation. High ceilings, stone walls that swallowed sound, 12 men seated in judgment. Robert stood before them, Hilda 3 paces behind, her testimony prepared and poisonous. Your Grace, Lord Charles began. We require your signature on the competency declaration. Garrick slid the document across the table. Robert's fingers traced the paper's edge. Read it aloud. He said. Unnecessary, Garrick responded smoothly. Standard language affirming your fitness to. I didn't ask you. Robert's head turned toward the council secretary. Read it. The secretary cleared his throat and began. Standard language, exactly as promised, until Robert's hand shot up. Stop. Read the 3rd paragraph again. The secretary hesitated. Your Grace. Read it. In acknowledgement of diminished capacity, the undersigned hereby transfers estate management to. Transfers. Robert's voice was surgical. Not affirms independent management. Transfers. Garrick shifted in his chair. A technicality. Is it? Robert tilted his head, listening. You're breathing faster, uncle. Your chair just creaked. You're leaning forward. The room went silent. I've been blind for 2 years, Robert continued. I've had nothing to do but memorize every legal document in my father's study. The competency declaration is 12 paragraphs. This is 14. You added 2. Charles leaned forward. Lord Garrick. My nephew is clearly paranoid. I heard you, Robert said quietly. Just now. You whispered something to your secretary. You said, the girl, Leverage. Hilda's blood turned to ice. Garrick recovered quickly. Lord Charles, this is absurd. The council finds in favor of the Duke, Charles said tiredly. This proceeding is concluded. Garrick stood, his face a mask of fury. As he passed Hilda, he leaned close. Midnight, he breathed. The magistrate comes for you at midnight. Then he was gone. Robert found her in the kitchen at dawn, already dressed for travel. You're leaving. Not a question. Garrick's magistrate comes tonight. She tied her bag closed without looking at him. I won't give him the satisfaction of dragging me out in chains. You're not a thief. The merchant's complaint is legitimate. I did take those herbs. Her voice was steady. I couldn't pay. I was starving. The law doesn't care why. The door crashed open. Garrick entered with 2 constables and the village magistrate. Perfect timing, Garrick said. Gentlemen, there's your thief. The magistrate cleared his throat. Miss Vance, you're accused of theft from Morrison's apothecary. The penalty is. I'll pay the debt. Robert stepped forward. Whatever she took, I'll compensate the merchant triple the value. Garrick smiled. How generous, nephew. Unfortunately, the crime isn't against you, it's against the village. The magistrate must proceed. Unless, the magistrate said slowly, the debt was taken in the Duke's service. Household staff acting on their employer's orders can't be prosecuted for procuring supplies. Robert saw it instantly, the only way out. Miss Vance was my housekeeper, he said. She wasn't on the household register, Garrick countered. She was employed privately. During my transition, Robert's jaw clenched. I was unstable after losing my sight. Violent. I drove away the regular staff. Miss Vance was hired discreetly to prevent me from starving to death. Hilda's breath caught. She took those herbs, Robert continued, because I refused to let anyone contact the village merchants. She was following my orders to keep me alive despite my irrationality. The magistrate frowned. Your Grace, this is quite an admission. It's the truth. Robert's voice hardened. And if anyone here wishes to prosecute a woman for the crime of preventing a war veteran from dying of self-neglect, they can explain that to the Crown. Silence fell. The magistrate shifted uncomfortably. If she was in your employ, and acting on your authority, the charges can't proceed. Garrick's face turned to stone. However, the magistrate continued, given your own testimony about your mental state, Your Grace, the Council may wish to revisit the competency question. Let them. Robert's voice was ice. Miss Vance saved my life. I won't let her hang for it. The magistrate nodded slowly. The charges are dismissed. The constables filed out. Garrick remained, his eyes burning with fury. You just confessed to months of instability, he said softly. In front of witnesses. Yes. The Council will hear of this. They'll use your own words to remove you. Probably. Robert turned toward where Hilda stood, silent. But she'll be alive to see it. Garrick left, his victory incomplete but his ammunition loaded. The door closed. Robert and Hilda stood alone. You just destroyed yourself, she whispered. For me. Yes. They'll take everything. The estate, the title. I don't care. Robert. I spent 2 years believing I was broken, he said quietly. Useless. A burden. You were the first person who treated me like I was still worth something. If saving you costs me everything else, it's a bargain. She crossed the room and took his hand. Then we fight Garrick together. I'm not leaving. Hilda, if the Council rules against me. Then we'll face that when it comes. Her grip tightened. You didn't abandon me. I won't abandon you. 3 days later, the Council reconvened. Robert sat before them, Hilda in the gallery above, while Garrick presented his case with surgical precision. The Duke has confessed to months of violent instability. He admits to driving away trained staff. He hoarded supplies and required constant supervision to prevent self-harm. Garrick's voice was smooth. This is not a man fit to manage an estate. Lord Charles looked troubled. Your Grace, is this accurate? Robert could lie. Should lie. But Hilda had taught him something more important than navigation. She taught him that truth was the only foundation worth building on. It's accurate, he said. For the first 6 months after I lost my sight, I was difficult. Difficult. Garrick scoffed. I threw things, refused help, locked myself away. Robert's voice was steady. I believed my blindness made me worthless. I was wrong. This confession alone. Let me finish. Robert turned toward Garrick's voice. You want to know if I'm competent? Ask me about the northeastern tenant farms. The ones with drainage problems. Charles blinked. I'm sorry. The Whitmore property. 18 acres. Clay soil retains water, ruins the wheat yield. Solution. French drains along the eastern property line. Redirect to the existing mill stream. Cost. £40. Increased annual yield. Approximately £200. Robert's voice grew stronger. The Morrison farm needs new seed stock. The current strain is vulnerable to rust. The village apothecary garden requires a proper greenhouse to extend the growing season for medicinal herbs, which would reduce our dependence on London suppliers. The Council stared. I know every property, every tenant, every outstanding debt, Robert continued. I've spent the winter learning my estate through documents Miss Vance read aloud. I may not be able to see the land, but I know it better now than when I had sight. His memorized information, Garrick said desperately. That doesn't prove. Lord Garrick. Charles's voice was sharp. What is the current grain price in York? Garrick hesitated. I would need to check the 7 shillings per bushel, Robert said. Down 2 pence from last month. Good time to sell our surplus before spring planting drives prices lower. Charles leaned back. Lord Garrick, your nephew appears more informed about his estate's economics than you are. But his earlier instability was grief, Robert said quietly. I lost my sight saving my regiment. I came home to find my father dead, my inheritance in chaos, and everyone treating me like I died on that battlefield too. His voice cracked. I was mourning, not mad. There's a difference. Hilda's hand gripped the gallery railing, tears streaming down her face. The council finds, Charles said, that the Duke of Northumbria is competent to manage his affairs. Lord Garrick's petition is denied. 6 months later, Hilda knelt in the rebuilt greenhouse, dirt under her nails, when Robert found her by the sound of her trowel scraping terracotta. The persimmon trees are flowering, she said without turning. I know. I can smell them. He sat beside her on the ground, heedless of his expensive coat. Letter came from London today. About Garrick. Her hand stilled. And the Crown investigated his finances after our council hearing. Turns out he'd been embezzling from 3 other estates he managed. Robert's voice was quiet. He's been stripped of his titles and properties. Last I heard, he's in debtor's prison in London, trying to convince creditors he's worth keeping alive. Good, Hilda said flatly. The irony is, if he'd just waited, my father would have left him a generous inheritance. But he was so convinced I'd ruin everything that he tried to take it by force. Robert shook his head. He destroyed himself with his own impatience. And his cruelty. Hilda wiped her hands on her apron. He would have let me hang just to hurt you. I know. Robert's jaw tightened. Part of me wants to feel sorry for him. The other part remembers you standing in that kitchen, terrified, while he threatened your life. Don't waste your pity. She touched his hand. He made his choices. We made ours. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Robert spoke again, softer this time. I never told you how I lost my sight. She set down her trowel. You don't have to. I want to. He took a breath. We were defending a supply route in Portugal. French artillery. I saw the barrel shift toward my men. Boys, really, most of them 17. I had maybe 3 seconds to get them down. His hand trembled. She took it. I got them down. The shell hit the wagon beside us. I remember the flash, the heat, then, nothing. I woke up 3 days later in a field hospital, and the world was black. But you saved them. I did. His voice was hollow. All 8 of them went home to their families. I came home expecting, I don't know, respect? Understanding? Instead, my father's steward took one look at me and suggested I'd be more comfortable managing a small cottage property. Something simple. Less demanding. Hilda's breath caught. My father's friends visited once. They spoke too loudly, like I'd gone deaf as well as blind. They patted my shoulder and told me how brave I was, then left and never returned. My own aunt, Garrick's sister, wrote to suggest I might be happier in a private sanatorium. For my own protection, she said. Robert. They didn't see a war hero, he continued, his voice breaking. They saw a broken thing. An embarrassment. A problem to be managed. The man who'd led cavalry charges was suddenly incapable of managing his own estate, his own life. They wanted me hidden away until I had the decency to die quietly and let someone whole take over. Tears streamed down Hilda's face. Then you showed up, Robert said, turning toward her, and called me an idiot for destroying my own roses. You didn't pity me. You didn't coddle me. You didn't treat me like I was made of glass. His voice steadied. You were the first person in 2 years who talked to me like I was still a man. Still Robert. Not the blind Duke. Not a tragedy. Just me. You are you, she said fiercely. You're brilliant and stubborn and impossible. I was going to say mine. She kissed him softly. The world tried to bury you. You wouldn't let it. We wouldn't let it, he corrected. I would have died in that garden, Hilda. Alone. Angry. Convinced my life ended the day I lost my sight. Garrick was just trying to finish what everyone else had started. Erasing me. And now. He pulled her close, his nose finding the hollow of her throat where she always smelled of rosemary and soil. Now Garrick is rotting in a cell, and I'm sitting in a greenhouse with my wife, planning next season's crops. Now I know that day on the battlefield wasn't an ending. It was just a different way of seeing. She leaned into him, both of them dirt-stained and content. The council voted to make you agricultural advisor for the Northern Estates, she said, because you taught me to navigate blindness instead of hide from it. No. She pulled back to look at him, though she knew he couldn't see her expression. It didn't matter. He could hear the smile in her voice. Because you taught yourself that worth isn't measured by what you've lost. It's measured by what you choose to do with what remains. And what we choose to do, Robert said quietly, is build something better than what we were given. They sat together as the sun set over the moors. Her voice no longer needed to describe what he couldn't see, because he'd learned that some truths run deeper than sight. And in the distance, in a London prison cell, Lord Garrick sat in darkness of his own making, while the nephew he tried to destroy lived in light. If you loved Robert and Hilda's story, don't let it end here. Subscribe to our channel for more tales of resilience, defiance, and love that refuses to be convenient. Hit that like button if you believe second chances are earned, not given. And share this story with someone who needs to hear that strength comes in unexpected forms. New stories drop every week, and trust us, you won't want to miss them.